I have with me Perry Johnson. He has been running for President of the United States. He is a successful businessman in Michigan. And I want to talk to him about what's going on in the country, what's going on with the Republican Party, what's going on with Donald Trump. Perry Johnson, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Well, I'm delighted. Thank you so much for having me.
I know you are pro-America. This is the greatest country in the world, and you want to see things be better, and that's why you ran for president. Sir, you've been very successful. You've lived the American dream. Is that American dream still available for the younger generation?
Well, if we don't do something to stop what's going on, it won't be available. Because what's happened is that Washington has decided to take over, and literally they are spending money like it's going out of style. But think about middle America and what's really happened because of what they've done. You go to the grocery store and you see that clearly things are 30 to 40% more than they were 2-3 years ago. Democrats can position it that things are really rosy, that everything's great. But the bottom line is, all you have to do is go out there and buy some food, and you realize that's not the case. Heaven forbid you want to try to buy a home now. You know, about 3 years ago, if you put 7% down on a home in the Troy area, which is where my office is, the overall cost for that home with 7% down would be about $2,000 a month. And the average home in Troy it's large. It's about 3,100 square feet. But bottom line is today, it is now $4,000 a month with the same 7% down. It's 100% more. And whether you're talking about Troy, Michigan, or you're talking about Des Moines, Iowa, you have the basic same picture. It's 100% more to buy a home now if you have a mortgage than if you bought it 3 years ago. Then you take a look at buying a car. The cost of leasing a car now is literally 70 to 80% more than it was 3 years ago. And I love it when they talk about inflation. You hear, oh, inflation is really very, very, very low. We have these very low numbers in inflation. It's only about 4% when you take out food, energy, and housing. Now, what is left? Now, it's really something when you think about what's going on in the country. And the reason for that is it's pretty clear. The government decided to go and spend a lot more of your money. So they increased the money supply from by about $4.5 trillion. And they didn't supply any goods and services for the $4.5 trillion. So they claimed that they had to increase the budget because of COVID, right? So now there is no COVID. And you would think that now they're going to cut. But no, they're not going to cut. They actually are going to go even more in debt. When I started the campaign, I was exaggerating our indebtedness because I have said we are around $32 trillion in debt. We were about 31.56. Now we are almost $34 trillion in debt. We are $33.9 trillion in debt as I speak today. And when we were borrowing money at 0.68 of 1%, it was a rounding error because now you're talking about spending under $300 billion for interest. But when you're borrowing money at between 4 and 5.5%, now it's a fortune. So even at 4%, you're looking at 1.3 to 4 trillion. Now that represents 30 to 40% of what we collect in taxes just on the interest on our debt. And this is something that has to stop. Now, the government really doesn't care to follow or pay attention to how much money is spent or where it's spent. And you can clearly see that by some of the examples. They send in the neighborhood of $100 billion over to the Ukraine. We ask for a bill so that they can account for where they're spending the money, where the money's going. All we wanted was an accounting of that. And that bill couldn't get passed. You can't even pass a bill that accounts for where this went. You know, the Pentagon was audited. They've been audited the last 5 times, and they've never failed. They've never passed an audit. They failed every audit. And the last audit, out of a $780 billion budget, they could not account for over $220 billion. They have no idea where the money went. And I'm asking, is this even reasonable? So right now, when you go to the store and you spend that kind of money for your groceries, you can thank the government. When you're going over there paying all this extra money in rent or try to buy a home, you can thank the government. And when you go to try to buy that car and you see how much the prices have inflated, again, you can thank the government. And is this really the way we want to go? I say we stop this. Now, I wrote a book on how to solve the problem. Very simple concept. It's called 2 Cents to Save America. Instead of having the government increase their budget every year so that they spend more and more on your money and we go more and more in debt, we do just the opposite. We freeze the budget and we cut 2 cents out of every dollar of discretionary spending. We change the way the government operates. Right now, the government in every department across the country is given a budget, and they go out of their way to make sure that every penny in that budget is spent every year. Now, their year end is September, and what they want to do is to make sure all that money is gone so they can get more money the next year. Could you imagine running a business that way? So that you go to your controller, your accountant, and say, I want to make sure we're broke every year. So make sure all of our money is gone so we don't have any money left. Now, it is so stupid, it's beyond belief. They incentivize the people to spend money wherever they can, even if they have to increase the price, whatever they have to do in order to get that money spent, that's what they do. Now, this is nuts. And we have to incentivize people to do just the opposite. So what I suggested in my book was that we bonus the managers who can achieve that goal. So they're incentivized to find a way to make more sense out of their spending. And they don't just go out of their way to spend as much money as possible to make sure they're broke every year. Because we have to change the way it's operated. And then once again, you have to ask yourself, how is it possible for somebody who's in Congress who, on an average over the period of the last few years, has made about $176,000 a year, and they accumulate $100 million. Now, I don't care how good of a saver you are and how good you are with your money. There is no way on earth it's even remotely possible. So let's clean up the way in which we're doing business in the government, and let's clean up the government. And I was campaigning on that very simple concept that we need to have better government. A government by the people, for the people. Now you take a look at what we've been operating. We have the government telling us what to do, government telling us how we should teach our kids, we should teach our kids, and the government trying to take more and more control of our lives. This is not the principle on which America was founded. In fact, we were founded on just the opposite. You go back from the very beginning of time, we had a handful of people around 1620 that came to this country for religious freedom. And they had to endure the most impossible journey on earth. There were about 101 or 2 of them, and only half of them survived. But in the process, we ended up forming a group of people that did seemingly the impossible. And in the 1700s, we had a dream that we would found a country unlike any country in the history of the world. A country by the people, for the people, that believed in the basic principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to achieve that goal, we had to literally do the impossible. I mean, we had to go fight the most powerful army in the history of the world. And we had to try to do this without muskets. They wouldn't even let us have guns. But we were determined. And despite the travails, despite the impossible task, we did the impossible. And through the power of literally sheer drive and determination, this handful of people defeated the most powerful army in the history of the world. And we built a nation unlike any nation. And I say we keep that nation alive. And to do that, we have to recognize that it's founded on a basic principle of freedom. Freedom of choice, freedom of religion, and a freedom to be able to do whatever you want, in the pursuit of that happiness, provided that you are helping everyone else around you, including this country. And we've lost sight of that.
Yeah.
But we can do it again.
Yeah, we need the right leadership. I think you would agree that one thing that makes the United States special is our middle class. What I can't figure out is this administration purposely trying to kill the middle class, or is it just incompetency? I can't tell the difference anymore.
Well, I'm not going to accuse the administration of being evil, but I will accuse the administration of not being very prudent. You think about some of the stuff that they do. They have what's called the Inflation Reduction Act, which is really nothing more than an inflation act. Because if you're going to incentivize people and pay them $7,500 to go buy an electric car, obviously this does nothing but cause inflation. You've now given $7,500 to people where nothing is provided for that service. And what do? We actually try to see if we can get more business over there to China because we want to help China out. China, however, builds the batteries, right? We can't build these batteries in the United States. We essentially buy them from China, ship them over here. And in the process of buying these batteries, it's the most expensive component on the car. These batteries are like $20,000. Now, we now are sending $74 million a day to China just on the interest on our debt to China. And we're doing what we can to help build up their military. We're trying to do what we can to give them more money to build up their economy. And we're doing all this while we're suffering here. Does this make any sense whatsoever? Now, the Inflation Reduction Act is really an inflation act, but what they do is reword it so that they can get the bill passed. And it's just complete nuttiness. But that's a political move, and apparently they sold America on it. And the people say, okay, it's an Inflation Reduction Act, the government can't be lying, so it must be the case. When in reality, it isn't. And what we have to do is get back to the basics, understand that the government now is not operating in a very prudent fashion. And what they're going to be talking about in short order is how they're going to have to cut Social Security, and they're going to claim, oh, it's because we don't have enough people being born, or we have too many people living longer. They'll frame it in some way where it looks as though it's our fault and not the government's fault, when in reality, they've just been borrowing money from Social Security to spend this extra money. They've been spending your money like it's going out of style. And frankly, they don't care. And what group of people have really been hurt? It's been the middle class in America. The greatest thing about America has been the fact that we have this great middle class that could have a really great life. But if the government keeps doing what they're doing, it just makes it worse and worse. In middle America, understand that the overall median wage in the United States actually went down in the last year, despite the fact that we had inflation. So the median wage went down. Now, that is not in any way logical. It makes no sense that this administration says they're clamoring for the middle class, and yet the middle class is much worse off now than they were under Trump. And they can just ask themselves that question. So you wonder why the polls are so low? That's the reason the polls are so low. Because they can say all they want, they can blow all the smoke they want, they can advertise all they want, but all the people have to do is just go to the store and they'll realize the prices have gone up. Even though they may argue, no, some of the prices have not gone up. I guess they had a sale on turkeys a while back. So maybe the turkey prices were a little lower. Yeah. I don't know. They'll pick one item that might be lower, but you and I know that the average price of food is categorically higher than it was 3 years ago, and not by 2%, but by over 30%. And that is a fact.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, 2 years ago for 4th of July, they were bragging that hot dogs were 13 cents cheaper. It's like, who cares? Like, I can't afford a house. I can't afford my rent. I can't afford the rest of my groceries, but great. An 8-pack of wieners is 13 cents cheaper. And that's what they focus on. I wanted to get your insight on this, Perry. You mentioned in your exit letter that you were shocked by the corruption within the RNC leadership. Vivek Ramaswamy has said something about that. Larry Elder has said that on my show. Can you give us some background on what you meant by that?
Oh, yes. When we were running for president, they laid out a set of parameters that you had to meet in order to get on the debate stage. And the RNC was controlling it. Now, among those parameters, you had to get 40,000 donors. Now, this was never a requirement, but they put this requirement in because they wanted to try to control who was going to be on the debate stage. So we looked at it. We knew it wasn't reasonable. They put requirements that you had to hit you had to hit 1% in the national polls, and we knew that these were probably things that were never before included to be on the debate stage. In fact, they weren't, but the RNC was going to control it. So Larry Elder had the same issue. But in my case, I spent a ridiculous sum of money advertising nationally to hit this 1%. Now, it was stupid from a logical point of view to go spending a lot of money in a national scale so that you get people in California saying they want you as a candidate, because for two reasons. Okay, California's not voting for another year from the time I was advertising, and then we're not going to win California. California is going to go Democrat no matter what. So, but nevertheless, I spent the money. I spent about $16 million, and I achieved those parameters. In fact, what had happened is that I got a call, my team got a call from Fox, because Fox was already expecting me to be on the debate stage. I had 54,000 donors, and I needed 40, so I clearly met that. I had a whole list of polls where I hit 1%, and they decided they were going to exclude them. Now, how they could exclude the McLaughlin poll is beyond me. McLaughlin was one of the best pollsters in history. They said, well, we're excluding McLaughlin because he was connected with Trump. Well, every pollster is connected with Trump. He was former president of the United States. Okay, I mean, this is nuts. Okay, what does his being connected with Trump have to do with me? Because if anything, it's a negative. Because if he's connected with Trump and they're going to vote for Trump, I'm going to get fewer votes. Then they had the Victory Strategic poll. This was the most interesting of all. We had the person who owns this pollster is a statistician, and they did a poll across the country. Now, he gave all the data for that poll, and in the data for the poll, 38 states responded, because he had 832 respondents out of the whatever it is, 170 million that are picked at random by the computer. Now, we have 18 states that only have 1% of the population or less. For example, population of Wyoming is what, 600 some thousand people? So the probability of being selected, if you're going to have 830 out of 170 million, and that's excluding all Democrats, the probability of being selected is less than 1 in 200,000. So on an average, you're only going to have about 36 states responding unless you pre-select, right, and decide you're going to choose one area and not randomly select. So we asked, well, we had 38 states responded. What is the normal number of states that respond? They have no idea because they don't have that information from any of the other pollsters. And she excluded this poll and said, we're not going to count it. So she excluded 5 of the national polls, maybe it's 6. She didn't count the Caravan poll. She didn't count the Harris-Harvard poll. She didn't count the Emerson poll. She decided she was not going to count the McLaughlin poll. Oh, then the Rasmussen poll, she's not going to count that. You know that from Larry Elder. She's not going to. So she ended up excluding then the Victory Strategic poll. She's not going to count that. Here's the real comedy. 60% of the pollsters never even had my name in them. And I still had 6 national polls at 1%. Now, obviously, I was always over 1% in Iowa and New Hampshire because I'm campaigning there. So that was not much of an issue. That was a non-event. But the bottom line is that I met all the requirements for the debate stage, and at 11:10 that evening on Monday night, she calls me. I had just been practicing for the debate. We were all set to go. We had our room over there in Milwaukee. We had, I think we were touring it, getting the walkthrough at 2:00 because Fox had been in contact with our people. Everything was all set up, and she told me that they were excluding me from the debate stage, and those are the reasons they gave. So, bottom line is, they decided that they didn't want me. They decided, obviously, they didn't want Larry Elder for whatever reason on this debate stage. Now, they had their own reasons why. In my case, I know why. They figured I was too Trump-like. They didn't want to have another loose cannon out there that they can't control. Let's face it, I was funding my own campaign. I was not beholden to anyone, and I'm not going to listen to any of their BS because I think we have a huge problem in Washington. And my job was to try to shrink Washington and shrink their influence, because right now we've got to start having Washington go on a diet. They're spending too much money. They're taking too much control of our lives, and this stuff has to stop. And that was always my theme. And I don't think they liked it.
Yeah. Well, interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to see behind the scenes, because now what we're seeing is leaders of the Democrat Party or the Republican Party, they're deciding who is going to be the president, not the people. We have these judges in Colorado who are deciding who gets to be on the ballot or not. And it's not the American people. If people want to vote against Trump or Vivek or whoever it is, that's our right. That's our choice. But now these judges, all of them Democrats, decide, okay, we're going to go ahead and remove him. What are your thoughts on the Colorado ballot situation for Donald Trump?
It makes us look like a banana republic. He's not even accused. I mean, they haven't even charged him, and they're excluding him from the ballot. Think of how un-American that is. And according to our law, even if somebody is convicted, they can still run for president. That's the law. Now, you have somebody that's not even charged yet, and they are already excluding him because we have Democrats that have decided they don't want Trump on the ballot, because if Trump goes up against Biden, he's going to win. We're not going to have that.
Yeah.
And they want to decide the election. So in Colorado, we have a situation where the judges of Colorado want to decide the election, and probably they think people shouldn't even vote. It should just be decided by the judges over there in Colorado.
Wow. That's arrogance, if nothing else. But now, this morning I read California and now the state of Maine, they're trying to remove Donald Trump from the ballot again for a crime he's not been convicted of. Is this going to end with the Supreme Court slapping down this ruling?
Oh, there's no way on earth this is going to stand in the Supreme Court. We've always had a situation in the Supreme Court where we have people that tend to be very responsible, and they're going to go out there and they're going to be very honest. They dedicate their lives to this. And I fully believe the Supreme Court will just clearly shoot this down, because they're going to follow the Constitution. They're not deciding that we're going to have America be a banana republic. This is the kind of thing that you see in some of the third world countries, where they just decide they're not going to let this guy run for president, or they're not going to let this guy run in any kind of an office. And they make this decision. And this, we chastise them. And here we are supposed to be the leaders of the free world. And we set this kind of example for the rest of the world. It makes us look so bad.
Yeah, the president of El Salvador last night said, America can never lecture the world on democracy ever again because of the way that you guys are running your elections. The whole world is watching this, and they just don't.
That's right.
It's this desire to hold on to power even at the expense of the country, the expense of the middle class, the expense of the Constitution. It's just really gross if you think about it. And yet, I just spent several days with a rabid Joe Biden fan telling me for hours every day how he's the best thing since sliced bread, how the media just isn't encapsulating the awesomeness of what he's done for America. I'm like, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills with him telling me all of this stuff.
Actually, I feel sorry for Biden because it's pretty clear. I mean, just you look at the way he walks and almost shuffles, and then can't remember where he is, can't remember the names of the people, and has difficulty even shaking hands. So he is now president of the United States, and I don't think there's any question that he has some major issues. And the issues really don't even relate to his age, because you have people, even in their party, like Bernie Sanders, who are very sharp. And Sanders, I think he's old. He's a couple of years older than Biden. But it's not that. You take a look at Trump. Trump is sharp. Now, what about Art Laffer? Art Laffer, I think, is 84 years old. And this man is articulate, razor sharp, just brilliant. I was listening to Warren Buffett. I know he's a Democrat, but he seemed to be pretty sharp too. And I think he's 90, right? So 92 or something. So the bottom line on this is that Biden obviously had some issues. I think it's a problem. He had a couple of aneurysms, and I think it affected him. And I feel bad for him, but it doesn't mean that I don't love this country. I think the country is the greatest country in the world, and we have to just rally behind the country so that we can continue to be the greatest country with the greatest opportunity. But right now, if people you really use some common sense, they can see this is not the way to go. And Biden obviously is not as sharp as he was 25, 30 years ago, because he's had a lot of things happen to him.
Yeah. I'll let you go on this, but out in Hollywood, the actor Robert De Niro, who's a great actor, but he just hates Trump with, so much fury. He said he would rather have Joe Biden living on a gurney running this country than Donald Trump. I mean, how sick is that? You'd rather have a demented person who can barely get off the stage running the biggest military in the world, the fiscal policy of the world. Like, it's insane to me, that they would rather have this person that obviously is dealing with mild dementia, health issues, versus someone who seems to be, near the top of his game.
It is amazing, yes. Well, I think people will reflect on whether or not things were better under Trump than they are under Biden. And they can also take a look at who is more articulate at this point. It's pretty clear that Trump is still razor sharp. And obviously, if you take a look at whether we were better off under Trump or under Biden, the answer was clear. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work that out. Yeah. In the meantime, let's face it, we are going to work hard. We're going to keep our heads up, and we're going to continue to pursue whatever we need to do in order to make this the greatest country possible. And I do believe that I'm very fortunate. I've been very fortunate my whole life. I'm a guy that started out with nothing, but my dad told me in the beginning, being born in America means you've already won the lottery. And it's true. And, I worked in the steel mill to get through college, but later on, I got a job in the auto industry. I had an idea. The Japanese had come in with tremendous quality. They were killing us. They had better quality and lower prices. And I thought I knew how to fix the problem. And my background was mathematics. And I introduced statistical process control and other statistical techniques in the auto industry. And in about 4 or 5 years, we had the best quality in the world. And then I had this idea that we should have quality as a standard and a way of life. And I wrote a book on it, ISO 9000. It took off like hotcakes. And now Perry Johnson registrars and Perry Johnson laboratory accreditation do business in 61 countries around the world. I live the American dream. I want that opportunity for my kids and for all of the other Americans that we have right now. And it can continue. We just have to fight for it. And we've always been fighters. We haven't ever gotten to where we are to be the most powerful nation in the history of the world by sitting back and saying it can't be done. We instead have gotten to where we are because we believe it can be done, and we don't give up. And I'm not going to give up, and neither will you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. This is a great country. It's not a perfect country, but I've lived around the world. I've traveled around the world. This country is amazing. And the greatest proof of that is 10 million people have illegally snuck in because it's a great country.
It's true.
Yeah.
It is true.
Yeah.
It is funny. We're going to send $100 million over to Ukraine, and we'll send all this money for other people to fix their borders. We wouldn't even spend the money to fix our border.
Yeah.
Now, don't you think that's incredible?
Yeah. Well, we've been talking about insanity most of the morning. So I want to thank you for coming on. I know that you are busy. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to speak with me. If people want to continue to follow you, what's the best way to do that?
Go to perryjohnson.com.
Okay, perryjohnson.com.
And they can find out what it's like running for president, because I made a reality series on that. And if they go to perryjohnson.com, they can go backstage. They can type in reality series and they can see what it's like. And they'll see really a lot of the stuff shouldn't even have ever been recorded, but I recorded it as it is and as it plays out. And some of the stuff is really hard to even believe.
Wow. Okay, we'll do that. I'm also going to put a link to your book down below so people can check that out. But thank you so much for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. And happy holidays. Merry Christmas.